I only noticed the floor plan was wrong because the measurements didn't make sense. There was an empty gap between two corridors, a pocket of space where there should have been solid concrete, but the scanner picked up nothing. No structural density, no wiring, just void. It was freezing that day. No had empty stop for a week, and most of our crew was running on cold sandwich, instant coffee, and sleep deprivation. I remember standing by the reinforced hatch, rubbing my hands together, staring at the blueprint like it was lying to me. Maybe it was. We were hired to disassemble Site 9, a decommissioned Soviet bunker 12 kilometers east of Dresden. It had been sealed since 1973 after a fire supposedly destroyed the lower archive levels. No one ever bothered to check until us. The hatch groaned when we forced it open. Metal on metal, rust cracking off like dried blood. Inside, the corridors were narrow, tiled in pale green ceramic, and reeked of wet copper and mold. I remember the sound of our boots echoing too loudly, almost delayed, like something was mimicking the rhythm. 2 days into the survey, I noticed a steel ladder bolted to the far side of the generator room. It wasn't on the plans. It descended into a black shaft, maybe 4 or 5 meters deep, ending in what looked like a sealed door. No markings, no warning, just a blank steel plate. In the dark, Primera K let it in. Our supervisor, Herr Fischer, said the original plans from '68 didn't mention anything about a sublevel under that wing. He joked it was probably a septic tank. It wasn't. We dropped a light down the shaft. It bounced once, then twice, and landed with a soft metallic thud. Not hollow, but not solid either. That night, the generator failed twice. I chalked it up to cold damage, but we started hearing things too. Metallic clicks coming from the shaft, sometimes in pairs, sometimes alone. One of the interns, Tobias, said he dreamed of a red hallway with walls that breathed. We laughed until he woke up screaming. The next morning, the ladder was gone. Not dismantled, not collapsed. Gone. Only blank wall remained, faintly stained where the bolts had once been. I remember brushing my glove against the ceramic and feeling a pulse, a faint vibration beneath the tile, almost like a heartbeat. Then it stopped. I didn't tell anyone. Instead, I pretended I was mistaken. The blueprints didn't show a ladder, so maybe it had never been there. Maybe I imagined it, or saw shadows in the generator smoke. But the light we dropped, still missing. We continued the deconstruction. For a few days, nothing strange happened. Our team removed old consoles, stripped wires, cataloged what little was left. The air grew drier, the mold smell faded, and for a moment, it felt like any other cold, forgotten bunker, until Tobias vanished. He'd gone ahead to photograph the archive level, what was left of it. I waited 10 minutes, then 15. No response on the radio. His flashlight was still on the floor, facing a corner where the walls formed a wedge, but he was gone. No footprints, no drag marks, just his voice. Later that night, faintly echoing through the air ducts, not calling for help, whispering something, again and again, over and over. I recorded it on my handheld device, played it back at camp, but there was nothing on the tape. Not even static. 3 days after Tobias disappeared, the staircase reappeared. Not the ladder, a staircase. It was made of the same metal, but wide, bolted, and welded to the shaft's inner wall. We hadn't installed it. No one could have, not with our equipment, not in a sealed shaft overnight. It spiraled downward into the same black, hollow space. I didn't report it. Part of me thought we were being watched or tested. The installation crew from Berlin hadn't returned our calls, and Herr Fischer started acting like everything was fine, obsessively cataloging furniture, repeating inventory numbers aloud, even when alone. At night I listened to the duct. I couldn't help it. It became a ritual. I'd press my ear against the metal and wait. Sometimes I heard Tobias, sometimes it wasn't him. It sounded like paper being crumpled underwater, or breath being forced through teeth. Slow, rhythmic, waiting. I stopped sleeping. One morning, the power cut out completely. No reason, no overload. The fuel reserves were untouched, and yet the corridor lights flickered into nothing. We lit up the tunnels with emergency lanterns, cold blue fluorescence that barely clung to the walls. That's when we noticed the hallway near the archive was longer, physically longer. I walked it myself, measured it with my own steps. From the generator room to the archive entrance, it had always taken 17 steps. Now it took them. I didn't mention it. I just turned around, returned to camp, and sat in silence while the others passed around cold stew. Someone said the weather station outside had stopped transmitting. Another said the batteries had frozen. No one wanted to check. That evening, I took my flashlight and went down the new staircase. I had to. I don't know why, but I did. It went deeper than I expected, at least for full revolutions before the air change. It got warmer, slightly humid, and carried a scent like old books sealed in damp cellars. My skin started to itch. My eyes watered, and then I reached the door. It was the same blank steel as before. No markings, no panel, just a flush surface in the dark. But this time, there was a faint light bleeding from beneath it. Amber, pulsing. I touched the surface. Warm. The steel was warm. That's when something scratched from the other side. Not violently, just once. Like a finger tracing along the metal. Primera. Ba? Kith? Hawaii. The light beneath the door grew brighter, then vanished instantly, like a filament breaking. The darkness pressed against my skin. I turned to leave, but the staircase wasn't there. Primera rea. Shed out my hand struck concrete. No air. No shaft, no exit, just solid, featureless wall. I screamed, kicked, slammed the flashlight against it. Nothing moved. Then, behind me, a sound, wet, like something heavy dragging over tile. Primera turned around, and the door was gone too. Just me, trapped inside a place that shouldn't exist. And in the pitch dark, something exhaled. I must have blacked out. There's no other explanation. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on my back at the bottom of the staircase. The original one, not the spiral. My flashlight was next to me, still on, flickering. The beam pointed toward the ceiling, revealing a fine dust suspended in the air, like ash. I had bruises on my arms, a gash across my left knee. My fingernails were cracked, dirt embedded deep beneath them. I'd been clawing at something, but I didn't remember doing it. Above me, the shaft was open, just open, like nothing had happened. I climbed out slowly, my body ached. Every joint felt wrong, like they'd been forced into positions they weren't meant to bend. Herr Fischer was waiting at the top. He didn't say a word, just stared at me with a distant expression, then turned and walked away. I tried to follow him, but my legs buckled. I sat against the wall for what felt like hours, shaking uncontrollably. The corridor lights were back on. The hallway was its original length. Again, 17 steps, no more. The others avoided me. No one asked what happened. No one offered help. That night, I found something new. Tobias's wristwatch, still ticking, sitting neatly on my cot. It was set to 3:17. The same time, I lost the staircase. I asked around, but no one admitted leaving it. I started to wonder if Tobias was really missing, or if he had ever existed. His name was no longer on the personnel list. His locker was empty, his photos and the team file gone, erased. Even his footprints in the snow were missing. I couldn't eat. Every time I brought a spoon to my mouth, I smelled something rancid, like meat left too long in the sun. My skin itched constant. I started to scratch without noticing blood under my sleeves, ragged skin beneath my collar. I tried to sleep, but my dreams were wrong. They weren't even dreams. Not exactly. Just images, flashbulb stills of a room I've never seen. A desk, a tape recorder, walls covered in looping red wire, like veins nailed into concrete. And always that low hum, like something enormous was breathing just beneath the surface. The next morning, our camp was rearranged, not vandalized. Rearranged. The tents had shifted several meters east, aligned with the old missile corridor. The tool crates were stacked perfectly off. No one claimed responsibility. No one even noticed only Primera sa W Italiano. Or maybe only I remembered how it was before. Herr Fischer started to speak in English. He'd never spoken a word before. Now he walked the corridors muttering fragments. This is memory. 4 steps between. It never sealed right. One night I followed him. He walked barefoot, slowly, toward the archive level, the same place Tobias had vanished. I kept my distance, my flashlight off, heart pounding. When he reached the corridor, he stopped. Then he turned his head, not toward me, but toward the ceiling, and whispered, "I remember this part." That's when the lights blew out. Every bulb in the corridor exploded at once. Glass rained around us, total darkness. I dropped to the floor, heart racing, trying to stay quiet. But something else wasn't. Footsteps, wet slapping against the tile, getting closer. I didn't move, not because I was being smart, but because I couldn't. My limbs locked, breathing slowed. My heart pounded against my ribs, but the rest of me was still, like prey. My back was pressed to the cold tile floor, my palms sweating against the gritty dust, and those footsteps kept coming. Not fast, not slow, just steady, intentional. They didn't sound human. There was weight behind them, but also like something pulling against the surface. The rhythm was all wrong. It skipped every third step, or paused too long between two. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I was alone, still in the corridor, still on the floor. But the lights were on again, and the air was dry, too dry. My nose bled when I sat up. Herr Fischer was gone. So was the smell. The coppery sting that had filled the tunnel before it had faded, replaced by something sweeter, like burn of fruit. I climbed back to the main hall. No one said anything. No one even looked at me. That's when I realized something else was wrong. The calendar. It was 4 days ahead. 4 full days had passed since I followed Fisher, and yet my beard hadn't grown. My water bottle was still half full. My last journal entry was dated the same night. But the rest of the team had moved on. They had new assignments, new floor plans, a new arrival date for the demolition crew. To them, I hadn't been missing. I simply hadn't mattered. Later that day, I found Fisher's boots. Just the boots, sitting perfectly aligned outside the archive corridor, toes pointed toward the wall. His name tag had been torn in half, both pieces stuffed into the left boot. Inside the right boot was something else. A tooth, human, yellow, cracked. I showed it to no one. Something had shifted in the team. No one spoke above a whisper. Meals were taken in silence. Even the wind outside had stopped. One of the interns, Marco, began wearing gloves at all times, even indoors. He said the walls felt different, that they were too warm. I knew what he meant. My cot began moving during the night. It would shift by inches, sometimes east, sometimes north, never the same direction twice. Once, I woke up on the floor of the generator room, still under my blankets, pillow beside me. I was starting to forget names, directions, the smell of coffee, and the bunker felt deeper, physically deeper. Rooms that used to connect no longer did. Corridors looped back on themselves. I dropped the bolt down the main stairwell and never heard it land. Once, I heard it bounce. Hours later, and then came the photos, printed ones, stacks of them in the main hall, placed on the folding table we used for paperwork. Black and white, faded at the edges, but all showing the same thing. A room with no ceiling, concrete walls, fluorescent lights hanging by frayed wires, and a floor made of mirrors. In each photo, a figure stood in the center, blurry, unfocused, always in the same pose, arms slightly raised, head tilted left, as if listening to something behind the camera. No one recognized the room, or the figure, but the photos kept coming. Every morning, neatly stacked, and every day, the figure got closer. Sign. I'd only just switched on the receiver, hadn't adjusted frequency, hadn't even logged the signal strength, and the static jumped to life. Not a crackle, not white noise, a voice clear, calm. Speak in English. You're late. Lev, I froze. No one else was on shift. No other operator was scheduled that night. It was just me and 2 guards asleep upstairs. The station sat buried beneath 20 meters of permafrost, 300 kilometers from anything resembling civilization. Our only contact was Moscow, and Moscow didn't speak English. I stared at the console. TDL reads 0.000, no active frequency. Still, the voice continued. You're cold. The coffee's gone. Your hand hurts. Primera look down. My hand was clenched, white-knuckled, fingernails digging into my palm. It did hurt. I hadn't even noticed. I reached for the recorder. Standard issue. Magnetic tape. My fingers shook. The voice had stopped, but the static remained low, like breathing through cotton. I played it back. Nothing. Not even hiss. Like the tape had never turned. I wrote it off as exhaustion. I'd been awake for 30 hours, I told myself. I imagined it. Maybe it was leftover transmission. A foreign weather station bleeding through. A test. But the next night, it returned. Same time, same static, same voice. You wrote it down, didn't you? I didn't answer. That's good. You'll want to remember this part? Then silence. The air turned thick, heavy. The warmth from the heating vent vanished, replaced by that sharp, glassy cold you only feel in sealed concrete, where the walls breathe just enough to remind you you're underground. I checked the circuit board. No anomalies, but the power meter was pulsing. Not steadily, like a heartbeat. Almost like it was responding to my own. I touched the dial. The moment I did, the lights cut out. All of them. For 37 seconds, I sat in perfect darkness. Then the emergency bulb flickered on above me, not yellow, not white, but dim red, like a submarine. It bathed the room in blood-colored haze. Dust floated through it, swirling in unnatural spirals. The radio sparked, just once. Then the voice returned. What time is it where you are? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat had closed. Don't worry. It won't matter soon. I shut off the receiver manually, pulled the plug, cut the main switch. But the static continued through the unplugged cables, through dead lines. I jammed my fingers into my ears and still heard it. Faint, breathing. And beneath it, just for a moment, my name, not spoken, exhaled. I ran. I climbed the ladder to the upper level, 2 rungs at a time, heart rattling inside my chest like a loose bolt. When I burst into the common room, the guards were asleep, unmoving, upright, eyes open. They didn't blink, they didn't breathe, just sat there, facing each other, frozen. I didn't scream. I just stood there, until one of them, the older one, Zakir, turned his head toward me, slowly, Too slowly. You left the channel open. His lips never moved. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. After Zakar turned his head or whatever that thing was, pretending to be Zakar, the light flickered once, and both guards dropped like puppets, limbs slack, heads tilted, just unconscious. Or pretending. I didn't check. I just sat on the stairs and watched the hallway, hands still wrapped around the radio. My grip was so tight it left an imprint on my palm, deep enough that the skin split. At 3:41, the humming started again, not from the speakers, from the walls, a low, continuous tone, somewhere between a drone and a moan. It pulsed in and out, like breath caught in a metal lung. I pressed my ear to the concrete, and I swear to God, the wall throbbed, like it was alive. I returned to the radio room at dawn. The regular power had resumed. The emergency lights were off. Everything looked normal. Too normal. The cables were coiled. My notebook had been closed and stacked perfectly. The chair was tucked under the desk, but my coffee mug, the one I'd left on the console, was still half full, and it was warm. I touched it, almost burned my fingers. The logs showed no transmissions, no interference, but the recording tape had changed. There were cuts now, full segments missing, spliced with precision, 3-second gaps every 7 minutes. I tried to rewind one. All I got was static, but if I played them forward just straight through without touching anything, I heard something else. Buried, behind the noise, my voice, repeating the same sentence, slowly, rhythmically. I don't want to go down there again. Again and again. I don't want to go down there again. My chest tightened. I didn't remember saying it, but it was me. The same pitch, same cadence. The worst part, there was no down in our bunker. We were already at the lowest level. I began mapping the broadcasts. The strange ones always began at exactly 2:03 a.m. and ended at 2:36. Same duration, same interval. No matter what I did, jam the frequency, disconnect the power, remove it the fuse, the voice still came, and it always knew what I was thinking. You're going to ask about your brother. Primera Fros? My brother was stationed at a weather outpost near Yak. I hadn't mentioned him to anyone. He's already here. The voice changed that night. It didn't sound like a stranger anymore. It sounded like me. Not distorted. Identical. I stepped away from the console. Then the tape recorder clicked on, by itself. I didn't press anything. The reels began to spin slowly, stuttering at first, then steady. I watched as it rolled forward exactly 11 minutes and 47 seconds. Then, stop. I rewound it, breath held tight in my throat, and pressed play. At first, nothing. Then, the sound of footsteps. Soft, approaching. My own voice whispered, "You should have answered." And then, I'm already inside. I turned around, but no one was there. Just the chair, still warm. The following week was a blur. I stopped marking the calendar. Time had lost its edges, collapsed into a smear of echoes and repetition. The same sounds, the same phrases, ober and ober. I tried writing them down, burning them, tearing them, didn't matter. The sentences came back, sometimes carved into the desk, sometimes scrawled on the radio logs, sometimes tattooed into my dreams. The message was not meant for you. He can hear what you regret. You're learning to speak backward. I hadn't left the bunker in 9 days. Snow blocked the main hatch. The cold had gotten into the cement, the kind of deep freeze that makes metal breathe. It clicked at night. Tick, 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 like footsteps waiting their turn. The guards never woke up. Their bodies remained upstairs, stiff but unspoiled. No rot, no smell, just stasis. Eyes open, pupils shrunk to pin. One morning I found Zacher's mouth packed with strips of radio tape, each one etched with teeth marks. I began hearing my brother's voice. At first, in the headphones, then in the duct, then behind the console. Always the same phrase. I should have listened to you. But he never had. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Not since the fallout drill in Tomsk, when he froze outside the hatch while I screamed at the officer to let him in. He didn't make it, but his voice. It's in you tinks. It's in you about the toy we buried in the garden. The scar on my thigh. The sound he used to make when he couldn't sleep. A rasping hum, almost like singing through his teeth. The radio picked it up. Constantly. The dial stayed locked at 0.000, but the signal was always there. I began responding. At first, just in whispers, then aloud, then directly into the transmitter. I didn't know what I was saying. Half the time it was gibberish. Syllables I didn't recognize. Languages I never learned. Sometimes I'd black out mid-transmission. Wake up to find pages of notes scribbled in pencil I didn't remember touching. Lines, symbols, spirals. One message appeared repeatedly in the margins. He listens better when it's cold. The temperature dropped to minus 31 degrees Celsius. Inside, breath hung in the air like smoke. My fingers cracked and bled. The heating system showed no malfunction, but the warmth had simply stopped existing. I began layering clothes, 4 coats, 2 pairs of socks. Scars wrapped over my mouth until my vision tunneled. Still wasn't enough. My teeth ached, my bones pulsed. But the static, it thrived in the cold, clearer than ever. And then, it changed. The voice no longer addressed me by name. It started calling me by his... Hello? Ilya? That was my brother. I started to wonder, had I been wrong? Had I mixed it up? Had I died outside that hatch? And this, all of this, was his punishment. Or mine. I screamed into the microphone, begged, demanded the voice to stop. It only replied once. This is the only place we're still real. Then silence, and the console lit up. Every bulb, every dial, flashing in sequence, like something waking up. And the tape recorder began to rewind by itself. The tape rewound for over 3 minutes. No one touched it. No power was running. And yet the reels spun with slow, mechanical purpose, like they weren't obeying any machine, just responding to something. I stood there, wrapped in 3 layers of frostbitten wool, unable tomoba. The lights flickered in and out, then finally settled into a dull red glow. Same as before, same shade as blood through gut. Then, the audio began to play, not from the recorder, from everywhere. The speakers, the ducts, their walls. The static was no longer confined. It filled the whole space like a mist. The words weren't loud, but they clung to the air. We speak because you forgot. You listened before you were born. Return to the cold. I covered my ears. It didn't help. The words weren't entering through sound. They were already inside me. I stumbled out of the radio room, bumping into walls slick with condensation. The hallway floor was lined with frost, my boots cracking through the ice as I walked. One of the guards was missing, not moved. Missing, his clothes remained on the cot, pressed, folded, his boots set neatly beside them. Both filled to the brim with radio tape, shredded, looped, soaked through with what I hoped was oil. But it wasn't. I could smell it. Iron. The other guard, Anton, sat upright, head tilted back, eyes rolled white. His mouth moved, slowly, but no sound came out until I touched him. Then, in my brother's voice, he whispered, "Turn the knob to where it ends." I ran. Didn't think, didn't hesitate. I tore back into the radio room, tripping over cables that hadn't been there yesterday. Or maybe they had. I couldn't remember anymore. The entire space felt stretched, like the walls had been pulled wider, or I'd shrunk. The console was glowing, all of it. Every dial pointed to 0, yet the signals pulsed strong, rhythmic, like a heartbeat measured in electric current. And there, in the center, was the knob. I reached for it. My fingers barely touched the metal when I heard something behind me. Not a footstep, a shift, like gravity changed direction. The air pressed down. The light bent, my ears popped, and from the ceiling, just above the bulkhead, a voice. Not a speaker, not a vent, just the ceiling. Lev. I froze. "You've already sent the message." I pulled back, but the knob turned by itself. Not a twitch, a full rotation. The audio died. Everything stopped. Even the bunker stopped. Primera mea. In, death. There was no hum, no vent noise, no flickering, no sound of settling concrete or buzzing filaments. The entire base fell into a silence so deep I heard my own pulse in my teeth. And then, a second signal emerged. Different frequency. Not static, not language, just a series of tones. Soft, calm, measured. Then, a melody. Simple, repeating. It was the lullaby my brother used to hum before bed. The one from our childhood from our home. A tune no one else would know. Primera, sate down? I couldn't stand anymore. The console lit up one last time. Words scrolled across the green screen, pixelated, trembling. Transmission successful, identity confirmed, next phase. Integration, then the console shut down. Permanently, lights out, screens dark. And in the silence, something exhaled through the floor. Something huge, still breathing, still there. The door was welded shut. I don't remember who did it or when, but when I tried to leave the radio room, the hatch was sealed with a thick line of solder, as if someone had prepped it days ago, knowing I'd eventually try to run. The air was stale, not dead, just still, like a waiting room with no clock. I tore through the cabinets, emergency rations, vodka, a rusted flare gun, no crowbar, no cutting torch, no exit. The signal was gone, but the hum remained. Below the concrete, inside the walls, every now and then, I'd hear the melody again, low, almost imagined. The lullaby, always distant, always just behind the silence. I began writing on the wall. I didn't even realize it at first. My fingers moved without instruction. Symbols, words, sometimes in Russian, sometimes in English, sometimes in an alphabet I'd never seen before. I'd wake up on the floor, back sore, mouth dry, blood on my fingertips, and whole paragraphs written in looping spirals across the bulkhead. One message kept repeating, "It's safer when you forget." I started to believe it. I stopped trying to remember how long I'd been here, stopped checking the logs, stopped touching the tape recorder. Because every time I did, the world rewound. Literally, light reversed. Dust floated backward. I'd blink and be sitting again. Coffee, steaming, console cling, and I'd have no memory of how I got there. But something always changed. The temperature, the room layout, the number of teeth in my mouth. I bit into a ration bar once and counted 34. Another time, 27. No blood, chest ... wrong. I looked in the mirror, a small shard of polished metal above the sink, and saw something watching from behind my reflection. Not moving, not blinking, just there, waiting its turn. I kept talking into the mic. Not because I expected anyone to respond, but because it helped me feel real. Gave me the illusion that I had an audience, that someone, somewhere, might still be human. Then the voice returned, but it wasn't the same one. This time, it was a chorus. Layered, inverted, familiar, all speaking at once. "You're ready now. You've been prepared. The signal shipped you. You are signal." I tried to scream, but my lungs wouldn't obey. No air moved. Then the console powered on. Full brightness, no input, no switch, just a life. And the screen displayed 3 words. "Step inside. Live." I turned around. There was a door behind me. No wall, no ladder, no hatch. Just a hallway I had never seen, lined in red filament, pulsing, waiting. I stepped forward. My boots sank slightly into the floor. Not tile anymore, but something softer, like fabric stretched tight over bone. I heard voices, whispers, all versions of me. Every thought I'd buried, every regret I'd swallowed, every silence I'd chosen instead of truth. And at the far end of the hallway, the walls opened. Not with hinges, they parted, like lungs inhaling. Inside, the room was circular, metal, padded with decayed paper and what looked like discarded uniform. At the center stood the receiver, identical to mine, except older, rust, patched, bent, covered in frost. It was already recording. No operator, no chair, just the console, blinking, listening. And on the tape, Deca label, Ilya Bunker 7, archive complete. I took a step back. My name wasn't Ilya, but the tape said otherwise. And somewhere behind me, the hallway was gone. Only the console remained, and the sound of static, slowly reshaping itself into breath. It was supposed to be a routine audit. Box numbers, file counts, cross-referenced by barcode. Nothing sensitive, nothing even interesting. Just declassified NATO logs from 1961 to 1972. I'd been on the job 6 weeks, and this was my first solo overnight. They gave me a clipboard and a flashlight. Didn't even check if my keycard worked. Just waved me down the corridor with a tired smile. "Don't get lost in there," someone joked. They all laughed, but no one told me what the buzzer was for. The vault sat 2 levels underground, beneath a retired communications wing outside Brussels. The original structure dated back to Cold War peak, but it had been updated modern lighting, newer AC, concrete polished smooth like hospital flooring. The entrance was a reinforced steel hatch with a secondary lock system. Once inside, the door could only be opened from the outside. Standard security protocol. I stepped in at 1806, the hatch sealed behind me. No drama, no noise. Just the smooth click of magnetic locks engaging. The air was dry. The lighting hum felt too loud. And everything smelled like photocopier toner and old rubber. I started the count. Each row held 20 boxers, 16 rows in total, everything organized by NATO incident codes to 7,000 series for training ops, 8,000 for communications failures, 9,000 for potential escalations. I was halfway through the 3rd row when I noticed it. Box 8042 wasn't where it should have been. At first, I thought I double-checked, tripled, but box 8042 simply wasn't there. The barcode had been scratched off the shelf, like someone dragged a key across it. I made a note, moved on. Then came the second anomaly. Box 9180. Not missing, duplicated. 2 of them. Same code, same label, same case, number, but slightly different handwriting. The older one had my supervisor's initials. RG, the newer one, had mine in my handwriting. I stared at it for minutes. I hadn't written that. I hadn't even touched that row yet, but the ink was fresh, still smudged at the edges. I opened it. Inside, empty cassette tapes. No labels, no reels, just dozens of shells, every single one cracked open. The smell inside was wrong, like dust, but sweeter. Like whatever had been recorded there never wanted to be forgotten. I shut the lid, moved away, tried to focus on the checklist. On the task, I was cold. My hands were shaking. The light flickered once, 10 return it. I passed it off as electrical. This place was old. Then I saw the clipboard. It had moved, just a few inches, but enough. It was now resting on the lid of box 8042, the one that wasn't there before, but it was now. Box 8042 was back, exactly where it should be. I didn't touch it. I checked the time, 1922. Still hours to go. I considered using the buzzer, calling upstairs, but the intercom light wasn't on. No signal, and the hatch, still, sile, primera, moved on. 4 rows later, my flashlight started dying, not flickering, just dimming in pulses, like the battery was being drained by something heavier than use. Then I noticed the sound, subtle at first, cardboard flexing, a soft shifting of weight. The boxers were breathing. They were breathing, not loudly, just enough. A shallow rise and fall, the kind you hear when someone sleeps beside you, not snoring, not restless, just present, alive. But it wasn't someone, it was the shelves. Te boxers, all of them. All of them. I stood frozen between rows 9 and the flashlight fading in and out. Clipboard pressed against my chest like it might do something. The air had shifted, no longer dry. It was damp now, clinging like the walls had exhaled something warm and moist into the sterile cold. I ran my fingers across the boxers. They were warm too, slightly, like blood, under skin. I kept moving, refused to look back. I told myself it was insulation failure. Maybe a ventilation unit blowing heat through the wrong vent. But, deep down, I knew the difference. This wasn't environmental, it was intentional. By 2045, the labels began to change. Not all at once, slowly, one by one. Box 7310 became 731G, then 731D, then just Julian, typed, not handwritten. I tore off the label and checked underneath. Still 7310, but the new one stayed in my hand, warm to the touch. I dropped it, kept walking. The further I went, the stranger it got. The shelves, no longer aligned. Rows that used to run straight, now turned subtly inward, like I was being funneled towards something. My steps felt longer, heavier. The concrete underfoot began to shift shades, pale gray to something almost green, like oxidized copper. I reached row 14, stopped. Every box was labeled with my supervisor's name, not initials, full name, Robert Graves. But he'd never worked this vault. He was strictly surface level. Oversight only. I'd never seen him handle a single classified file, and yet there it was, over and over, dozens of times. Robert's Graves incident, red snow access, level 4 clearance, in Vilay Opa 1. Inside, a stack of photographs, black and white, blurred, but I recognized the location. This vault, different lighting, older bulbs, cracks in the walls that had since been patched, but unmistakably the same place. The photos showed a man walking between the rows, carrying a clipboard, wearing my coat. In each frame, he was getting closer. Same poster, shame, head, tilt. Same scar on the back of his hand from a bike accident at age 12. I dropped the photos, turned. Row 14 no longer ended where it should. Instead, it opened into a new corridor. No lights, just shelves, and a red bulb glowing at the far end, pulsing slow and low, like it had a heartbeat. I stepped back, looked around. The hatch was gone. No entrance, no wall, just rows and rows and rows. The vault had expanded, or I had moved deeper without noticing. But into what? I called out. No answer, only a soft fluttering sound like paper being stirred by breath. Then, a single sound behind me. Metal on concrete. A tape reel had fallen out of one of the boxers. It rolled slowly toward my feet, unwinding as it moved. There was something written on the tape itself, not printed, carved. 3 words, "You are filed." I didn't touch the tape, but I didn't. It stopped at my boot, still slowly unraveling, the reel twitching with some final leftover momentum. I crouched to look closer, and that's when I saw it wasn't just carved, it was burned. Each letter melted into the tape's plastic surface. "You are filed." Past tense, primera ba quedi. The row behind me had changed again. The boxers were gone, replaced by empty shelving. No dust, no residue, just stripped metal, and then, lights out. Not a flicker, not a warning, total darkness. Like a shroud dropped over the entire vault. I stood there, heart clenching in my chest, ears filled with my own breath, and the low, sticky groan of distant concrete under pressure. My flashlight had long since died. My radio buzzed useless static. Then something clicked, far away, metal on metal, like a door. I turned toward the sound, but I had no idea where it came from. The acoustics of the vault where warped sounds didn't behave here. They bent, folded back, came from above, when they should have come from behind. I took a step, then another. Felt my hand graze the edge of a shelf, except it wasn't cold. It was warm, slightly damp and beating. Like a pulse. Like a pulse. A wet, subtle thud that timed itself against my steps. I kept walking, eyes useless, hands against the shelf edge like a blindfolded child. The floor beneath me had shifted soft now, like carpet soaked in oil. My boots left no sound, my breath fogged. And then, light. Light! A single bulb flickering weakly above what looked like a reading desk. There was a file open on top. Just one. I approached slowly. Pages yellowed with age, corners curled. The cover had no title, only a NATO incident number, 9900 error, Recursion Protocol, Personal Fiel, Hotan Don. I froze. JD, my initials. I flipped the page. The first entry was handwritten. My handwriting. Vault shift confirmed. Memory loop stabilized. Exterior extraction not advised. I didn't write this, but I remembered it. Somewhere in my chest, I knew the words. I could feel them echoing in my ribs like I'd read them 1,000 times in dream. I never recalled. I turned the page. Dozens more entries. Fragments. Shelves continue changing. Photographs update daily. Body count uncertain. 10-1 line. Centered on the page. Written in red. The archive is not a place. It's a decision. I closed the file, looked around. The shelves had returned, but they were upside down. Literally flipped. Boxers hung beneath them, affixed by nothing. And the rows were narrowing, converging toward the desk like the space itself had bent inward. From one of the boxers came a whisper. Soft, familiar. My name, not spoken. Typed, I turned, and the box opened on its own. A strip of paper slid out like a tongue. On it, a single sentence. You're already being reviewed. I heard footsteps, not from far. From under the desk, I dropped the paper, stepped back, too late. A hand reached out, pale, veined, paper thin, gripped my ankle, typed in another hand, and another. And then the desk was gone. The light burst, and everything went still, except the breathing. I came to lying face down in aisle 6. The boxers were back. The light overhead hummed again, pale white and steady, like nothing had happened. Like the vault had never gone dark. Like I hadn't just been dragged down into a space that didn't exist on any blueprint. But I remembered. I remembered the file. The hand, the sentence on the paper. You're already being reviewed. My ankle ached. I pulled up my pant leg. 5 thin bruises circled the joint like a cuff. No swelling, no bleeding, just evidence that something had touched me and held on. Hard, I reached for the clipboard. It was there, waiting, back where I started row 3. The original checklist still attached, but now, next to each item, someone had added a red X, all except one. Box 9900R, the one with my initials, the only box left to check. My hands were shaking as I stood. The air felt wrong again. Not cold, not humid, just slightly off, like walking into a room where someone had just been crying. You can't see it, but you feel it. I started walking. The rouse didn't shift this time. No distortion, no warping. Everything stayed exactly where it should, until I reached the end. Row 16, shelf 4, box 9900R. Unlabeled, no barcode, no file tab. Just a smooth black box, slightly larger than the rest. I reached out, stopped. My reflection was in the surface, faint, warped, but unmistakable. Except my mouth was moving, silently, saying something I couldn't hear. I pulled my hand back, the lights dimmed. A soft click from behind me. I turned, and there it was, the vault hatch, wide open, bright white hallway beyond, empty, still, inviting, the door that had been sealed the entire night, now unlocked. I ran. Didn't check the clipboard, didn't shut the box, just sprinted for the exit, boots slamming against the polished floor, echoing sharp and clean. The hallway was colder than it should have been. Frost crawled along the walls in patterns that looked almost like writing. I didn't stop to read. I climbed both levels back to the admin floor, burst into the records office, and collapsed against the radiator. Everything was empty. No staff, no guards, just humming fluorescents and the smell of stale coffee. I checked the clock. 13:13 a.m. I'd been inside for 9 hours. I should have been out by midnight. I opened the logbook. No one had signed me in. My name wasn't there. My file wasn't there. Even my badge number, missing from the employee directory. But worst of all, I was wearing different clothes. Slightly older uniform, faded ID patch, and in the coat pocket, a strip of paper, typed, crisp, fresh, return scheduled for 1992. I turned it over. Stamped on the back, review status pending. I tried to scream, but the vault was already closing again. I never told anyone. How could I? The records were gone. The vault logs didn't exist. My badge ID had been reassigned to someone else, a French officer who'd been discharged in 1982. I checked, he died. But according to central files, I was never hired, never assigned, never entered the NATO facility on March 12th. And yet, the scar on my ankle remained, the one shaped like 5 fingers. I stayed quiet for 2 months. Back home in Montreal, I tried to convince myself it was psychological. Isolation, sleep deprivation. Maybe I had a breakdown, a psychotic episode. I even went to a neurologist. She said my brain showed unusual patterning in short-term memory centers. No explanation. She prescribed rest, but the dreams got worse. They weren't dreams anymore. They were rooms, specific rooms. Each night, I'd wake up standing in the corner of my apartment, facing the wall, cold, barefoot, and always holding something I hadn't gone to bed with. Paper clips, keys, index cards, all unmarked, all warm. One night, I woke with my arms wrapped tightly around a Neto issue archive box. Box 9900R. I hadn't brought it with me. I couldn't have, but it was real. I burned it in the sink. It screamed, not loudly, just a soft, high tone, like old cassette feedback. The sound made my eyes bleed. After that, things started moving in the apartment, only when I wasn't looking. Drawers rearranged. The mirror above the sink shifted angles by millimeters each morning, just enough to show more of the room behind me. Once, I looked, and I saw myself, but younger, still inside the vault, still holding the clipboard, still checking the final box. I stopped sleeping. I moved in with my cousin, told him it was mold in the walls. He didn't ask questions, let me sleep on the couch, brought me tea, told me I should see someone. But that night, it followed me, the breathing bit. From inside his filing cabinet, I opened it. Inside, nothing. Except one item, an envelope with my name, typed, no return address, no stamp, just one sentence inside. You filed yourself. We only accepted. I dropped the letter, walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and found it humming. Not running, not buzzing, humming. The same melody from the vault, the same tone I heard in my dreams. I slammed the door shut, but my reflection in the stainless steel didn't move. He just stood there, smiling, holding the clipboard. I ran, left everything behind. No note, no explanation. Now I live out of hostels, change names every 3 weeks. Sleep with the lights on, but it doesn't help. Because the review never ends. Because I still wake up some nights holding objects that shouldn't exist. A single reel of NATO tape with my voice whispering backward. A pair of glasses I haven't owned since college. And once, just once, I woke up with a brand new personnel file tucked under my pillow. Top sheet stamped with a single word, approved. And at the bottom of the last page, return date confirmed. Vault access granted, 3:13 a.m. A file loads too fast, a clock stutters, a camera skips half a frame. All things you can explain away, but not this. Not what we saw, not what we became part of. I was stationed at Echo Black, a NATO listening post near Oslo, part of the SIGINT initiative to monitor Soviet comes through Arctic satellite bounces. It was buried in a hillside, reinforced with concrete and steel, accessible only by coded tram. 3 stories underground, no sunlight, no sky. We worked in shifts, watched monitors, logged broadcasts, logged silence, to sometimes 4 hours. The Cold War was like that. Nothing happened until everything did. On the day it began, I spilled coffee on log terminal 3. No dramatic explosion, just a shorted keyboard. We swapped the terminal out and moved on. But that evening, the playback footage from Cam 7 displayed something odd. Not corrupted, not glitched, just wrong. It showed our senior officer, Marshall, walking down corridor C, in reverse. Not rewound, the timestamp moved forward, but he walked backward. Perfectly, fluidly, as if time itself had reversed for him. But not the rest of us. We flagged Italiano. He denied being in that corridor at all, said he was in coms during that time, and our records backed him up. But we had video. He watched it, said nothing. Hoost stood up and walked out. 2 days later, Cam 7 disappeared. Not failed, not disabled, gone. Feed blank, no static, no error code, just a black square. We replaced the camera. New one flickered. Recorded 2 hours of hallway footage, then rewound itself. No input, no reason. Then started recording again. From the future. I know how that sounds. I do, but I'm not wrong. The timestamp showed tomorrow's date, 23/17, the 11th of September. We watched ourselves walk down the corridor. We wore tomorrow's uniforms, carried folders we hadn't received yet. In one clip, I held a mug I'd never seen. Black, no handle. Later that day, I found it on my desk. Still warm, still full. That night, I dreamed of static, of clocks melting in reverse, of my own voice, saying something I couldn't understand, not because of the language, but because it was spoken backward. The next morning, the hallway was longer, only by a few meters. But, the blue exit lights had moved. The sealant vent rotated the wrong direction. And Cam 7? Still gone. I opened a log file to report the error. Found it already written, in my own phrasing. My sentence structure, even my usual typo subsystem, instead of subsystem. Time-stamped 22 minutes in the future. The entry ended with, "He already knows you've seen it." I asked Marshall. He didn't answer. Just looked at me, like I was someone he used to know. That night, the ventilation fans shut down. No alert, no explanation. The oxygen dropped 3%, and the surveillance logs started recording us before we moved. It started small. The cameras would capture a door open. Then we'd open it. Footsteps on the tape. Then we'd hear them. Laughter in the hallway. Then we'd remember telling the joke. But only after watching it. Like the recordings were pulling us along. Not predicting, controlling. We tested it. Laid out a simple sequence. I'd walk from room 1 to room 3 at 14 o'clock. No no interaction. But when we reviewed the footage, I never reached room 3. I stopped halfway, turned, walked back to room 1. When the time came, I tried to follow the plan. I really did. But halfway there, I paused. Felt off, like Dierbu mixed with vertigo. And then I turned around, walked back, without even realizing why. Exactly as the footage showed, I could not do it. The surveillance had become instructional. Marshall started logging everything manually. Paper only. Ink. No terminals. He said it was the only way to avoid contamination. He kept the notes in a locked drawer. In the observation bay, rotated pens, swapped handwriting styles. But the surveillance logs still updated themselves. Still showed him writing them before AD. And then came the tapes. Not footage. Audio, cassettes. Unmarked, unnumbered. Found scattered in the mail chute. No sender. No documentation. Just dropped into the tray as if they'd always been there. Each one labeled in handwriting none of us recognized. Eco Black, Playback 5, Eco Black to a noise, Eco Black last arrival, we listened. The first was static, layered with what sounded like breathing. The second slowed down Morse code, followed by a metallic clicking, like a prosthetic hand on tile. The third, just my voice. This isn't where I died. I still haven't. They're recording the moment I do. I don't remember saying it, but it was Muna accent, cadence, slight stutter on the second word, and then came the loop. A specific clip from the main corridor. Cam 3. It played nightly at 3:12. US walking. Always the same sequence. 3 of us. Myself, Ruben, and LT Lane. Walking toward the break room. But each night, the detail changed. First, my shirt was torn. Then Ruben wasn't blinking. Then Lane was missing a hand. The following day, each of those changes came true. Every time, Lane lost 2 fingers in a stairwell accident. Ruben developed a sleep disorder that kept his eyes open, even under sedation. My shirt was caught on a soldering unit, shredded down the back, but the log showed it first. Then the real world complied, like we were being sculpted to match. Lane quit, or tried to. He submitted his resignation on paper, requested tram extraction. No one replied. When he forced open the emergency lift panel, he found only wall, smooth, poured, no trace of a shaft behind it, like the exit was never there. The next day, he stopped speaking entirely, just sat in the observation chair and watched himself on the monitors. Even when the power went out, he still saw something. He told me the last thing he said, "They're watching me," before I finished thinking. Then he cut his own mic cord and vanished. No body, no trail, just gone. The surveillance system still shows him walking the hallway at 2:17. Every night. Sometimes, he's not alone. We stopped trusting the mirrors. All of them, the ones in the washrooms, began to flicker. Not the lights above them. The reflections, faces moved out of sync, blinked too late, held expressions longer than we did. Sometimes they smiled when we didn't. I was shaving when I saw myself nod, slowly, like a signal. I hadn't moved. I dropped the razor and backed away. The reflection kept watching, kept waiting, then tilted its head to the left. That same night, the hallway footage started showing reflections where there were no mirrors. Windows that didn't exist. Whole panels of glass that captured angles we'd never seen. At 1:14, Ruben passed through corridor became to code his movement. But the far wall, the one that should have been solid concrete, showed a perfect mirrored reflection of him walking toward the camera, not away. The timestamp said 1:12. 2 minutes before it happened, we played it again. At 1:14, Ruben disappears from the footage, just vanishes. But his reflection keeps walking. Right up to the lens, right up to US. I turned off the feed, unplugged the terminal. Didn't help. The feed stayed on, flickering, looping, no source connected. We stopped using cameras after that. Paper logs only, patrols in pairs. No speaking during observation hours. Any personnel caught preemptively responding to recorded footage were relocated to upper levels, but there were no upper levels anymore. The stairwell to the surface now ended at a blank wall. Metal plating, no seam, and the tram just sat there, powered, lit, going nowhere. We considered a controlled overload of the surveillance system, killed the circuit, wiped the drives, but every attempt failed. Wires would vanish, fuses would crackle and seal. One time, Marshall's screwdriver melted in his hand. Literally melted steel sagging like wax, left third-degree burns across his palm. The medical bay showed no damage, no swelling, no evidence of trauma. And the screwdriver, back in its drawer the next day, clean, unused. The logs documented none of this, but they did show me, standing in room 4B, alone, holding my hand over Marshall's shoulder, even though I hadn't been there. Not yet, but I felt it. That day, in the break room, an odd pulse in my arm, like someone guiding it. My hand raised, hovered, rested gently on his shoulder as he reviewed the data, just like the video had shown. He didn't turn, didn't react. He just whispered, "You're starting to sink." After that, I began hearing things. Not voices, just clicks. Mechanical ones, like buttons being pressed, but always before something happened. Before lights flickered, before the intercom chimed, before I got a new thought. Click, then awareness. Click, then movement. I woke up one night with a mouthful of paper, shredded log entry, typed, dated for the following week, each one detailing my behavior, my route, my hesitation. At the bottom of every page, compliance, 97%, I burned them. Didn't matter. The next morning I found them again, reprinted, neatly stacked on my bunk. Compliance, 98%. The cameras were never for surveillance. I see that now. They were for training. We weren't monitoring patterns, we were being taught them. Shaped, molded, aligned, and whatever lived inside the playback system. It wanted us predictable. Marshall was the last to fight it. I found him in observation bay, surrounded by notebooks, dozens, maybe hundreds, all handwritten, all time stamped down to the second. He wasn't recording events, he was anticipating them. He pointed at one notebook. I opened it. The first page read, "You found this just now. You're going to ask me what it means." I looked up. I opened my mouth, then closed it. He smiled, didn't look at me, just stared into the camera above us. "It's recursive," he said. "Every thought we have, it's already processed. Every action, already rehearsed. We're not people. We're recordings learning to become people again." The screen in front of us blinked, a feed from COM1. It showed both of us sitting in that very room, but the version of me on the screen was blinking too slowly, and the Marshall on screen, he was already gone. Only an empty chair where he'd been. I turned to him, but the real Marshall was staring at the wall, eyes unfocused, repeating a phrase under his breath. "I am remembered. I am remembered. I am remembered, ... double quotes, then silence. His breathing stopped, but his mouth kept moving. I ran. Didn't stop to grab the notebook. Didn't shut the door behind me. I made it halfway through the corridor when I heard the click. Not mechanical, not artificial. The door behind me re-recorded itself shut. Primera turned back. The hallway was blank. No entry, no camera, just smooth metal. No seams. I screamed. Nothing came out. I reached for the wall. It felt soft. The color shifted slightly under my touch, like old analog film, reacting to light exposure. Then a faint sound from the end of the hallway. Playback, a tape spinning. Primera, foglio d'italiano. The walls grew narrower. More, textured, like skin pulled tight across the shape of something vast. The sound led me to a door I'd never seen. A smaller room, no designation. Inside, a single chair, facing a wall of monitors. All of them off, except one. Defeato static. Lines, hiss, no image para Satan. I don't know why. Maybe it was relief. Maybe resignation. The moment I did, the tape stopped. The static cleared, and I saw myself, walking into this very room, sitting in this very chair, over and over and over. A loop. Each time, slightly different posture, slightly different timing, but always the same result. The loop ended with the same phrase, typed on screen. Subject 5D, recognize self. Then the feed froze, and the walls started pulsing. Not with light, with breath, slow, heavy, rhythmic. And I realized the truth. We were never recording them. They were recording us. I don't know how long I stayed in that chair. Time doesn't work right down here. It doesn't pass. It repeats. Every time I blink, I see the same frame, same hallway, same file, same version of myself looping back into the moment of realization. I tried standing once. The chair pulled me back. Not physically, not with force, just familiarity, like it knew I belonged there. The screen keeps showing variations. Me running, me screaming, me bleeding from the ears. One version vomits a reel of tape onto the floor. Another simply fades out, like the footage was never complete. Each variant ends the same way. Subject 5D failed to break compliance. I asked out loud what compliance was. The lights dimmed, the monitors shut off, and a new voice answered. Not from a speaker, not from inside me, but between the walls. Every surface vibrated as it spoke. You watched yourself too long. Now we watch for you. Then silence. No hum, no power. Just darkness. And the soft, slow tick of a recorder no longer plugged in. I got up, walked toward the corridor. It wasn't there. Only a narrow gap now. Just wide enough for a person to slip through, if they turned sideways, if they held their breath, if they accepted not knowing what waited on the other side. I waited, then entered. The tunnel was moist, pulsing, lined with mirrors, but not glass. Memory, flashes of moments I hadn't lived yet, pages I hadn't written, a body I hadn't. The air smelled like old film, bitter, warm, familiar. My hands were changing, not aging, not decaying, just simplifying, details being removed, prints softening, lines disappearing, until my fingers were smooth, plasticine, blank, just enough to push buttons, to hold a clipboard, to type what I was told. I emerged into a room, not the surveillance center, not the break room, not the world, a sphere, endless, lined with seats, all filled, dozens of figures, all facing a single massive screen suspended in the void, watching, and on that screen, me, right now, writing this, saying this, realizing this. I looked around. They didn't blink. They didn't breathe. They just watched, and I heard my voice again, not from the screen, but from every direction. You were never David. You were a reenactment. You were the tape. Then the screen paused. The room dimmed. A new phrase appeared across the air. Review complete. Archive accepted. I tried to move. I couldn't. My legs no longer bent right. My skin no longer sweated. My mouth no longer opened. Only my eyes remained mine, staring out, watching the next version of me walk in. Sit down, repeat, the same loop, the same moment, obey and obey, until even that became static.